Evelyn weakly raised her hand. Me. Daniel just felt his temples jutting. When exactly were they together? It wasn't stupid in the end. Just a little bit of thinking showed that it must have been the night they went out looking for mutants. Does Robert know about this? Zack shook his head. You're the first to know, but they'll all know soon enough. Daniel hides the lost gleam in his eyes and turns his head to ask her, have you already made your choice? No more thinking about considering the others. Evelyn was a little stunned as her mind began to organize the statement. It was considered. Before he'd come over, Zack had analyzed the current situation with her in detail. She was going to Noble Girl Camp soon, and it would be difficult for her to reach out to them in the future. Zack's suggestion was for her to pick 2 of the nobles, and she offered to just pick 2 in the dorms. But Zack said that their rank was too low, and if it was the noblewoman campsite that was going to choose her husband, at the very least they would all be of the 8th or 9th rank. That's how the world is, the weak are the strong. If she was surrounded by only 4th-order men, the others would look down on her. Considering she didn't want to choose someone she didn't know, Zack said she could choose Andrew and Manuel. Evelyn doesn't really care if there are powerful men around her, because she has an effect bounce on her that lasts for a world and no one can hurt her. But the less people know about this matter, the better. The original owner still has enemies in the capital star. Once it blew up, there was no telling if the Federation would want her there. So she planned to wait until she finished dealing with the original owner's enemies before considering Daniel and the others. After all, they had also lived together for such a long time. It was impossible not to have a little affection. Well, one is enough for now. Evelyn answered him, weighing her words. Daniel was having a bit of a hard time with the fact that he was clearly the first one to discover her. Because of the extremely exaggerated male-to-female ratio, some men who couldn't hold back their desires in private would also choose to get laid. At that time he had thought about it. Although he was straight, it seemed like it wasn't unacceptable to be with her. He put down the 2 pieces of cake in silence and revealed a smile that was worse than crying. I know. This cake is for you. If you don't want to eat it, just throw it away. I won't bother you. The door closed again, and Evelyn's heart was a bit sour. That's how she is. When faced with a handsome and beautiful man, she can't say no. Zack glanced at her face. Sad? If you really want him, it's not impossible. But Willow, you have to figure out who you really like. Or do you want them all? He sighed and hugged her. No, it's not really sad. It's just that I think he's been pretty good to me too, and there doesn't seem to be anything else I can do to repay him other than that. Zack stared down at the top of her head. He had his own selfish thoughts. He'd even like to have Evelyn all to himself if he could, but that wasn't going to happen. So he'd have to settle for the next best thing, stretching out the timeline and spending more time alone with her. You have to realize that protecting your daughter is supposed to be the duty of a Federation subject. You don't have to be burdened with it. And if it's because you feel guilty, I don't think Daniel and the others would be willing to accept the love that's being showered upon them. Evelyn nodded, her arm around his waist tightening 2 more points. Daniel, who says I'm not willing to accept charity love? The flying ship was also divided into dormitories on a dormitory basis. A few of them lived together again. Seeing Daniel returning sullenly, Samuel suspiciously tried. Where did you go? Couldn't have gone looking for Evelyn, could you? Uh-huh. Seeing him actually admit it, the others stopped what they were doing. How did you know the location of Andrew's room? Where is it? How is she? Daniel didn't bother to answer and got into bed and covered his head with the covers. Samuel was still asking questions. Why don't you say something? What's going on and where's Zack? Why haven't I seen him either? Hearing him mention Zack, Daniel instantly shouted angrily. Don't ask. Are you tired of it? Zack is with her. Are you satisfied? Samuel was flabbergasted by his yelling and said resentfully. Is this taking gun pills? I didn't piss you off either. Richard got out of bed and flipped Daniel's covers right off, forcibly pulling him up. Zack stayed with her? What do you mean? Tell me more clearly. What the hell happened to you guys? Daniel snorted coldly. Oh, Zack has become Evelyn's boyfriend now. She said she only needs Zack, and that's enough. Long Yang's face brought a huff. What did Zack do? Richard was in a bad mood. Hell knows. Robert electrically remembered that night. He was out on watch. The 2 of them didn't know what they said in the tent. The next day's atmosphere was weird. It must be that day. William spoke mockingly. He's about to rip someone else's umbrella apart now that he has his own. Samuel, I've known he's not a good person. A commoner actually dares to think about a noblewoman. Robert spoke for him. Don't talk about Zack like that. Samuel looked at him coldly. Don't say that. The most stupid one is you. Give you a chance you don't even use it, and let others steal the first. Robert. This side of the young couple kissing and hugging and kissing, just about to break through the last barrier. Luckily both still had sense and knew that this was Andrew's room, and the 2 restrained themselves from doing anything. Until late at night, Zack left. Andrew next door, long known Zack in the inside, has been waiting, did not go to disturb them. But as time passes by, That heart is like being soaked in ice water, getting colder and colder. Seeing that they still know the measure, did not spend the night together, his heart tucked back into the stomach. Zach entered the dormitory. A group of people looked at him nose to nose, eyes to eyes. Samuel still did not hold back, coolly said, "Shed from the gentle land back? It's all girlfriends. Why don't you just spend the night over there?" Zach frowned and punched him on the right side of his face. "Speak to her with respect." Samuel was already furious. Now or would he be willing to hold back? At that moment the two of them fought. The others watched with cold eyes. No one made a move to help. The two did not use supernatural powers, just the most brutal fist and foot work. In the family fine raised Samuel were compared to Zach, who grew up from a young age and suffered a lot of bullying and humiliation. Within 2 strikes, he lost his strength. Zach looked at the people in the dormitory with a deep voice. "Whoever is still not convinced can come." Richard clapped his hands twice. "Being on top is different. You have the courage to speak. Have you forgotten that you are just a lowly commoner? Do you need me to repeat your life? Born in the nursery barn, your father is just a vegetable seller. Your ancestors have been living in that shabby 89 star for generations. Once you climbed up to be a noblewoman, you are very proud in your heart, aren't you?" Robert had the intention to persuade, but did not know where to start. Zach's face was blue. What's wrong with being born in a nursery barn? What's wrong with being a vegetable seller? With this kind of background, he had made his way to the position of their equal by his own hard work, one step at a time. Samuel wiped a handful of blood from his lips. "That's right. With Evelyn, this kid has changed his destiny against all odds." Kevin looked at him like he was garbage. "Stop it. We can still find another woman if we lose Evelyn. But he may only know this one noble woman in his life." Daniel didn't fall asleep. He had a complicated mind. When he heard Kevin's picking and choosing words, he got furious. He lifted the blanket and yelled, "Are you guys annoyed? If you want to make noise, go out and make noise. Don't disturb my sleep." No one spoke up again, and everyone silently isolated Zach. He didn't mind either, because there was light in his heart. On Evelyn's side, she was packing up and laying down when there came a knock on the door. "Come in." Andrew hid the jealousy in his eyes. "Sleeping?" She yawned. "Just about to go to sleep. Why?" "The rooms on the flying ship are full." The words weren't clear, but Evelyn understood. "So, why don't I go back to the dorms and stay there then?" Andrew waved his hand. "I didn't mean that. I meant, can I sleep on the couch?" Evelyn got up nimbly. It's fine. You sleep on the bed. I'll go to the dorm." Stealing the chicken, Andrew was starting to sweat. He really didn't mean it. "You have, on you. And thanks to the one man Well sent me. Now the others can't smell the odor on me. Isn't the flying ship just about to arrive? I'll go to the dormitory for a night, it's fine. You sleep. I'll go first." Without waiting for him to finish, Evelyn opened the door to her room in 3 or 2 steps. Andrew pulled her hand. "You don't want to stay with me?" Evelyn raised her eyebrows and looked puzzled. "What makes you think that? You're no better than a student. You have a lot of work tomorrow. How can you rest while sleeping on the couch?" He let go. "You sleep. I'll go over and find Manuel will be there for the night." She waved her hand. No, that's too much trouble." No trouble. Compared to putting her in the same room with so many men, it was nothing for him to sleep with Manuel for one night. Besides, it was a lie in the first place, just wanting to be alone with her. Seeing that she still wanted to leave, Andrew forcefully stepped forward and placed her on the bed in a horizontal princess carry. "Go to sleep. I'll see you tomorrow." "Evelyn." Andrew walked away with heavy steps and thoughtfully turned off the light for her. He didn't ask Zach because it wasn't his place, and he didn't want to keep her from sleeping when she was so sleepy. The speed of the flying ship was fast, and it arrived at the original planet the next day at slight light. Outside, there were several well-armed troops lined up, escorting 2 very distinguished-looking women. They were the president and vice president of the Noble Women's Camp. This time, it was also Chief Manuel who had reported to the Federation that there was a noble woman hidden in the military academy. As soon as they learned of this matter, the Noble Girl Battalion activated their highest authority to investigate Evelyn's classmates and life around her. Although it was unknown how many ranks of noblewoman she was. But the fact that the radiation of all her roommates in the same dormitory had been purified was the nail in the coffin. No one in the entire interstellar world could do such a heaven-defying ability. If it wasn't for the law of the Federation, the noble women born on each planet would belong to that planet. Such a heaven-defying purification ability wouldn't have landed on them. That's why the Noble Daughter campsite paid full attention to it. And the 2 highest commanders, the president and vice president, both took the time to come over specifically to greet her. One by one, the students disembarked the flying ship and saw the huge camp. "What's going on here? Why are the people from the Noble Maiden Camp here? I haven't heard that there are any noble daughters around here. I don't know which noblewoman it is. I'm a fan of Hakunen's noblewoman. It would be nice to meet her." Andrew and Zach escorted Evelyn off the flying ship. Several students hadn't left, just waiting to get a glimpse of the noblewoman. President Chin quickly greeted her and extended his right hand. Hello, welcome to our noble girl camp. Evelyn froze and extended her right hand as well. Hello, my name is Evelyn. Next to her, Vice President Feng Su smiled. It's windy outside. It's better to go back to the noble daughter camp first. President Chin glanced at the man beside her. This is? Evelyn didn't squirm and took Zach on her arm. This is my boyfriend. Turning her head to Andrew again. This is my instructor. President Chun unobtrusively sized up the two men and replied with a smile. Good. Together then. Zach's face softened and his whole body leapt up. She said he was her boyfriend. Hey. A few of Daniel's men were right behind them, watching the boy follow Evelyn to the car at your girls' camp. One by one, Samuel's eyes reddened as he opened his mouth. Damn, I'm so jealous of that Zach kid. I don't know what kind of luck I got. Richard snorted coldly. That's how civilians are, like the undead, with a ladder to climb up. Daniel sulked. Are you guys annoyed? All day long you are envious and jealous. Have that time to think about why you are not better than Zach. Samuel, you. Kevin sneered. You do know how to think, but Evelyn still doesn't like you? Why are you pretending? A few people are at war with each other, and it seems that Daniel's temper is about to get out of control. Robert Busy stood out to round up the situation. Okay, all of them talk less. The car stopped at the noble girl camp, and the clean white European-style building looked particularly grand in front of the crowd of high-tech buildings. President Chen smiled as he led the crowd into the office building. Coming and going, he could see quite a few men waiting to be purified. You've just arrived. You still need to go for a test first to see what order your purification ability is. The group stepped into the second floor and stepped inside a small room. Quite a few noble women were waiting outside to see what was going on. Is that the new one? I heard that they had been attending military school before. How can an honorable noblewoman stay with those barbaric men? What a disgrace. I don't know how old she is. Can she compare to Bai Nian's noblewoman? That's definitely not comparable. Bai Nian noble daughter is already at the 6th rank, and she's only 27 years old. This newcomer seems to be 19 years old. Wait and see. I guess she's at most a 3rd or 4th rank. Inside the room, besides some tables and chairs, there was also a room isolated by transparent glass. The glass room had round probe balls on the table and a few potted plants that had been eaten away by the radiation next to them. Come in with me, President Chun said with a light smile, and turned his head to bark orders at the two men. You guys just wait outside. Andrew and Zach responded in kind. After all, it was a transparent room, right under the eyes, and there was no fear of her encountering any danger. The noble women who were watching the spectacle met in 3s and 2s, and also waited outside the glass room to watch, along with their escort army. A group of people filled the room to the brim. The vice president frowned. I won't interfere if you want to watch, but there's no need for all of your escort army to come in. It's too many people. Her face still had to be given, and a few noble women commanded their escort troops to go out and wait. Seeing so many noble women for the first time, Zach took 2 steps back slightly, not wanting to get on their bad side. Andrew looked at ease, not reacting in any particular way, his eyes fixed only on Evelyn in the glass room. Come on, attach your hand to it. President Chen signaled Evelyn to follow her cue. She nodded and touched her hands to the probe ball. A long time passed with no half-reaction. The mocking voices of a few noble women outside had rung out. Oh, how dare you come to the noblewoman's camp without purification abilities? What was she thinking by spreading such a big lie? At the expense of the president and vice president who made a special trip to pick her up, but it turns out that she doesn't have purification ability, laughed to death, and compare her to Bai Nian noble daughter. She's not even worthy of mentioning her shoes to Bai Nian noble daughter. Among the people present, only Zach was personally experienced being purified by Evelyn. He couldn't stand to see the mockery of these women. The test isn't over yet. What's your hurry? One of the round-faced noble women turned around to look at him when she heard this, and her eyes immediately lit up. This man didn't look very old, but he was so handsome. It seemed like she didn't have this kind of untamed style within her husband. What's your name? Zach stunk. What's it to you? The small round face looked at the woman detecting in the room with one eye, and had a number in mind. She doesn't have the purification ability to have her own escort. If you want to join the escort, you can come to me. Zach wasn't the least bit impressed. No need. Little round face wanted to say something else, but looking at his cold expression, she didn't want to speak again. She was a 4th-ranked noblewoman, and it was never only others who held her up, not her holding up others. Humph, when the testing is over, he'll have to go back to wherever he came from, and then he'll be able to pamper himself with the chairman, so there's no worry that he won't be willing to do so. The other 2 noble women also noticed the frowning lawsuit over here. One of them, a horseface with a long face, thought that Andrew, who was cold and didn't speak next to her, was quite nice. She hadn't come into contact with this type yet. He didn't pounce like a dog looking at a meat bun as soon as he saw the noblewoman. There were bulging muscles all underneath that thin uniform, and not knowing what to think, she quietly blushed. "Hello, my name is Vivi." Andrew didn't even give her a look, just staring at the woman he had his heart set on. Vivi blushed. "Oh crap, more like it." Inside the house, President Chun frowned slightly looking at the unresponsive probe ball. "It shouldn't be, is it broken?" She took the probe orb and covered it with her own hand. A warm red light rose from the orb. Evelyn mused that her own powers were different from the others. The others were purification powers, while she was an internal power. "Chairman, let me try again." She didn't just dully touch on it and be done with it this time. Instead, she released quite a bit of internal energy into the probe ball, and the round ball finally reacted. First it was red light, then orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, and finally a glistening white light emerged. Evelyn's internal energy had already been used 9 times out of 10, and the white light flickered slowly, as if reminding her to come back for more. Gritting her teeth, she continued to channel her internal energy into it. Suddenly, the white light flickered and slowly changed into a golden color, and that shining light illuminated the entire room. It stayed bright for several minutes before it stopped and stabilized at a golden color. Everyone was dumbstruck. Your daughter's purification abilities were sorted by rank. It was 1 to 9 orders respectively. The detection ball would give a response based on the different equal orders: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and platinum. The further back the equal order was, the higher it was. The smile at the corner of President Chin's mouth was harder to suppress than AK. It's okay, it's okay." Evelyn took her hand back, and her internal energy seemed to have circled around inside the probe ball and returned to her body. 9th rank noblewoman. Even the capital planet only had one. A small planet as remote as theirs actually managed to land a 9th-ranked noblewoman. The vice president outside smiled with his gums showing. Before Evelyn came, the highest within the noblewoman camp was only of the 6th rank. Round Face and Wei Wei already didn't know what to say. Just now the two of them were planning to divide her man after the end. Now each of them were resentful and hurriedly led the guards to leave. The little bit of flirtation in their hearts suddenly disappeared cleanly, too strong to mess with. Evelyn glanced at the potted plants. "This is," President Chen explained, "that's also a part of testing purification ability. Do you want to try it? It doesn't matter if you don't want to. You're already at the 9th rank. All of this is nothing to you." Evelyn didn't think too much about it. It's not good to go through the back door as soon as you come in. It's better to go through the testing process as it should be, lest there be any rumors in the future. "I'll try." She attached her hands to each of the plants, and in a few moments, she had them all purified. The other few pots weren't spared either. Her hands brushed over them one by one, and they were all purified. President Chen curiously placed his hands on the leaves of the plants to feel them, and was shocked again in the next second. You purified all the radiation." Evelyn nodded calmly. "Yes." The vice president outside couldn't wait to come in and check as well, and there was not a single bit of radiation left on those potted plants. The two were greatly shocked. Even that 9th-ranked noblewoman from Capital Star did not have the ability to purify all of the radiation. President Chen calmed down and instructed, "When you use your purification ability in the future, you don't need to purify all of it. Purifying 20 to 30 is about right." Evelyn was puzzled. "Why? Isn't it better to purify all the radiation?" The vice president and President Chun exchanged a glance and eventually waved their hands. "Forget it, whatever." What the two didn't say was that looking at the entire Federation, there wasn't a single noblewoman who could purify all of the radiation. Her ability was too powerful. If she purified all of it every time, she might be coveted by other miscreants and encounter danger. But by purifying a little more radiation, the men would have one more hope of surviving. So telling her to hide, it would be a bit of a loss for the president and vice president. It's just that, since she's willing to do it herself, the big deal is to arrange more escorts for her when the time comes. The tests were all over, and Evelyn stepped out of the glass booth. Zach was busy walking to her side and handed her a can of milk. "Tired?" Evelyn shook her head. The next step was to go to the dormitory that the Noble Girl Camp had arranged for her. Originally, President Chen thought that she was at most a 7th rank, so the dormitory arranged for her was good, but not very special. Fortunately, when she was just tested inside, the vice president immediately arranged for one of the biggest and best villas in the Noble Maiden Camp to be given to her. That villa was more than 500 square feet and had all the facilities inside. A few people walked and chatted. "President Chun, now that you've joined our Noble Girl Camp, the selection of the escort army has to be put on the schedule. I suggest as soon as possible. Just select them in these few days." Evelyn was surprised. So soon? The vice president explained from the sidelines. Not soon enough. Originally, you were supposed to be selected when you were 18, and I don't know what you've been through before that, but you can't afford to have no one around you to protect you. Evelyn glanced at Zach. I have someone to protect. President Chun politely said. As a ninth-ranked noblewoman, you will be surrounded by an escort army of 9 teams according to federal law. Just 1 or 2 people won't be able to protect you at all. Evelyn realized in her heart. All right, then you guys arrange it. The vice president asked again from the side. By the way, you will turn 20 in half a year, right? Yes. President Chin smiled and brought up another matter. Then it's time to start selecting your husband. Her face almost clammed up. Isn't there still half a year left? There's no need to be in such a hurry, right? There's no rush. There's only half a year of preparation time left. You just came to the noble girl camp. Many things are unclear. As a 9th-ranked noblewoman, you will be choosing your husband in half a year, and the number of nobles coming will only be more, not less. You'll have to greet all the clans in advance, and you'll have to arrange the venue. In short, there are a lot of things to do, but of course, you don't have to worry about any of this. All you need to do is go to the office hall every day to help purify those who have been eroded by the radiation. I'll arrange the rest. The vice president glanced at Zach and Andrew. These 2 husband candidates she was not too satisfied with. The former was fine. It was this latter, just a 4th-order commoner. How to look at it was not worthy of a 9th-order noblewoman. Are these 2 the husband candidates you have decided on? She was just about to answer when Andrew took a step ahead and said, Yes. Evelyn, since when did she have to be with Andrew? The kid hadn't informed her either. After all, it's not good to brush him off when you've known him for so long. The vice president continued. In that case, then you only need to choose 1 more this time. Of course you can also choose more. Do you have any ideas yourself? Evelyn bit her lip. Can I not choose? Chun Hui sighed long and hard. It's a federal law. You can't not choose. If you don't want to, just choose one. Then if I have 3 husbands, do I not have to choose? Her eyes rolled as she thought of another way. By law, she had to choose 3 husbands. Right now there was already Andrew and Zach, so she'd need to choose another one. But what if there were already 3? President Chin shook his head regretfully. It won't work. Those nobles won't agree. They might even have objections if you choose just one, let alone none. According to the law, this is the case, but they might go behind the scenes if something happens to the husband you chose. You'll still have to behave when the time comes, you understand. Zach tipped his tongue against his back teeth. You don't have to choose if you don't want to, we're not afraid. Andrew nodded in agreement. Protecting your woman, can that be a wimp? No, I'm just asking. Harm, since it can't be escaped no matter what, then just choose. Now that the system no longer had a target object and didn't know who the original target object was, it wouldn't be bad if the target object could be chosen by mistake. According to the previous missions, the target is the strongest in the world. The target object is the strongest in this world, and when the time comes to give birth to a child, the points will also be more. She couldn't wait to have pups. When they arrived at the villa, the 2 presidents introduced themselves and left first. Andrew joined Zach in helping her make the bed. Are you guys going back to school? Andrew was an instructor and Zach was a student. Their status is destined that these 2 people couldn't stay with her for long. They still had to go back to continue their studies and careers. Not until you're done picking out an escort. Zach replied. Andrew voiced something else. Evelyn, come with me for a minute. I need to talk to you. The 2 go to an adjacent room. I said today that I'm the husband you chose. What did you think of that? He was the first to speak. Andrew was the one she had discussed privately with Zach, and if she had to choose a few husbands, he was good in every way. He had also done himself a lot of favors. She spoke in a low voice. Anything. Andrew sighed, wanting to hug her but not daring to. What I just said is something I've thought long and hard about, and I'm at an age where I'm choosing a wife, and I like you a lot, and I hope you'll accept me. Evelyn was a little uncomfortable. The uncomfortableness was a shift in status. It was as if the high school headmaster had confessed his love for her all of a sudden. It felt weird. She chimed in, feeling a little cold again. I know. Thanks for liking me. I'll try to like you too. Andrew frowned with tenderness. So can I hug you? Why ask for this kind of thing? Wouldn't it be better to just do it? So how could she be embarrassed to answer? Seeing the discomfort on her face, Andrew reached out and held her in his arms. Don't be afraid of the change of scenery. Zach and I will always be there for you to pick out your escort. And when I go back and finish my work, I'll be with you exclusively from now on, okay? Evelyn clutched his collar in her hand and retorted. No need. You can just busy yourself with your work. It's okay on my side. Andrew hoarsely said. I know, but I want to be with you all the time. Oh my God, who wouldn't get confused hearing that love talk? How is he so good at it? Evelyn rubbed her face against his chest. You're on your own. President Chen went back and reported to the Federation about Evelyn being a 9th-ranked noblewoman, and the Federation side quickly gave a response. Regarding the selection of the guards, it would be held 3 days later, and President Chun even wanted to hurry it up even more. However, the notification was sent out, and it would take a few days before the entire interstellar world would know that they had a 9th-ranked noblewoman to be selected for the guards. At the same time, the news of a 9th-ranked noblewoman choosing a husband in half a year also spread amongst the nobles. Those who had men of the right age in their families were all grabbing them back and cultivating them properly. The Liu family, Chung family, and Zhang family even directly called back their sons who were attending military school. For no other reason, after learning that there was a new 9th-ranked noblewoman, Evelyn's biography had already been investigated by this group of people. Learning that she had previously attended the Federal Military Academy, the parents of several students in the same dormitory only felt that the pie in the sky had struck their own family. As the saying goes, the nearer the water, the better the moon. It was rumored that the noblewoman had a 4th-order civilian beside her who was her classmate in the same dormitory. Liu family. Father Liu. No matter what method you use, you must select your noble daughter's guards in 3 days. William smiled bitterly. You think we don't want to? Robert, who was habitually short on words, didn't answer. Father Liu. A commoner can be looked upon by your daughter. Are you guys any worse than him? William impatiently replied. Not worse than him, but Evelyn likes him. Then why doesn't she like you guys? Look for the problems that exist in yourself. A 9th-ranked noblewoman hasn't appeared for a long time. If you all can't choose one, don't come back home in the future. I don't have a son as useless as you. Chung family. Chung father spat around Daniel. Why are you such a useless child? Even that commoner can be chosen, and you're also the roommate of a noblewoman. How come you're useless? Daniel was already annoyed by this matter, and when he heard his dad even spit on him, he was instantly enraged. How do I know what's wrong with me? She just doesn't like me. What can I do? Chung father sighed. You have to work hard. 3 days from now is when she selects her guards. With your rank, you still can't reach her husband. Think about the probability that the children born to noble women will also have purification abilities and top-level psychic abilities. Don't you want to have an excellent child in the future? Daniel huffed and replied. I know. I'm going to train. Such scenes played out in countless nobles. The closer the selection of Evelyn's guards was, the more everyone indulged in training, only hoping to perform better on the field. During these 3 days, Evelyn wasn't idle either. She went out the next day and went to the office building. A huge sign stood up across the lobby, filled with directories to be purified. She walked up to the window and asked, Hello, how do I take a purification mission? The staff was very nice, and once they looked up and saw that she was a newly minted 9th-ranked noblewoman, they were close to hand-holding her and teaching her how to take a mission. Light brain-binding personal information. Evelyn tried to accept 3 purification quests. She didn't choose to accept too many at once. After all, when she tried to purify Daniel and the others before, she had to get off her feet in 3 or 4. Arriving at her own exclusive office, Zach was off to the side, directing several of the men who had come to be purified to line up in order. The first man to enter the room had a country face, and at first sight of such a good-looking noblewoman, 2 blushes rose to his dark skin. You? Hello, my name is Wang Hao, serving in the 14th Legion. Evelyn raised her head and smiled at him. Don't be nervous. Come on, extend your hand. He sits down respectfully and extends his right hand. Evelyn uses her internal force to detect that Wang Hao has much more radiation in his body than Daniel and the others. Strictly speaking, in fact, Daniel's and their radiation values hadn't reached the critical point at all, and it didn't matter much if they weren't purified. But Wang Hao's body was almost entirely filled with black spots, and if he delayed for a few more months, then he would probably become a mutant. Evelyn didn't think too much about it, and maneuvered her internal force to purify all the radiation in his body. This one person topped the internal force of purifying 2 people before. After Wang Hao was purified and felt the radiation in his body himself, he reddened his eyes. Thank you. Thank you. In the past, spending exorbitant credits would only purify 1 or 20 radiations, and not 2 years later, he still had to spend credits to make an appointment to queue up. The radiation in his body was already approaching 95. Unexpectedly spending 1 credit point, Evelyn directly purified all the radiation. According to this, he wouldn't need to wait in line for another appointment for at least 10 years. The credits were a small matter, but it was troublesome to wait in line for an appointment, and one could easily have to wait for half a year. Evelyn smiled. You spent credits for me to purify for you. It's all due. There's nothing to thank you for. Wang Hao was even more shocked. In that previous purification, those noble women weren't high and mighty. No one ever said that it was proper for them to spend credits to purify. He stood up and respectfully bowed to her. Really, thank you. Can we add a light brain? You can call me for any trouble in the future. He hesitated but still uttered this request before those noble women didn't bother to add their light brain numbers. But Wang Hao just felt that Evelyn was different from them. Evelyn guffawed. Of course. As the saying goes, one more friend is one more way, and it's not like there's a limit to how many friends that light brain can add. The two exchanged their light brain numbers, and Wang Hao transferred a large amount of credits to her, far more than the original price, and he blushed as he thanked her and left. The federal law stipulated that all the credits paid by the person who needed to be purified went to your daughter personally. It was still wonderful to Evelyn's heart that she was earning so much money at once. She would need a large sum of money to raise her children in the future. The next thin man with glasses came in. The same process as Wang Hao. Evelyn completed the purification for him and thanked him again before leaving. The radiation of 2 people was as much as purifying 4 people in the dormitory before. Evelyn's face was a bit pale, and her physical strength had decreased after the rapid loss of internal energy. Zach worriedly spoke. Should we let the remaining one go back first? Why don't you rest and continue tomorrow? Evelyn shook her head. No, I'll just rest for a few minutes. She had seen the dense list of people waiting to be purified in the office lobby today, and if she purified one more person would hopefully survive. While Evelyn considered herself no saintly mother, she couldn't look at so many innocent lives and do nothing. It was too difficult for men in this world. Not only could they not get wives, but they also had to endure the pain caused by radiation day and night. And there were so few noble women who could purify the radiation that many of them had been waiting in line for most of the year before their turn came. If the purification was not completed in the limited time, they would turn into mutant species. Then one could only recognize their own bad luck. After resting for a moment and recovering most of her internal energy, she finished purifying for the 3rd man. The morning was also over. Knowing that she didn't like the cafeteria, so Andrew bought the ingredients in the morning and had her purified and made lunch at a pinch. She and Zach could have a hot meal as soon as they got home. Andrew was a novice at cooking, but he was a good learner and followed every step strictly as taught on the Star Network. It did allow him to make a decent meal. Let's pick up a few more purification people this afternoon, Evelyn commanded without looking up from her meal. Zach frowned. Sure you don't need a break? No. The president's office. Listening to the news from the secretary, President Chun was stunned. She really purified 10 people in one day? The noble mating camp never limited how many purification orders the noble women would take, but the most diligent ones would only purify 3 or 4 people a day, and it was that 9th-ranked noblewoman from the capital planet who wouldn't exceed 5 a day. This is a treasure that the noblewoman camp has found, a few older noblewomen exclaimed. 3 days passed by in a hurry, and behind her Evelyn restrained herself from purifying the entirety of the radiation for everyone, instead choosing to go for volume. Each man, she tried to purify the radiation to below 60, so that she would have the energy to purify more men in a day. Over the past 3 days, she had purified a minimum of 20 to 30 men each day. Soon it was time for her to choose her guards. The way to select the guards is by competition. There are 3 levels in total. According to Evelyn's status level, the guards would choose the top 50 through a competition. She would then personally select the 9 captains of the guards herself. These 9 captains would then choose their own teammates, 10 from each group. The entire escort army totaled 90 people. Early in the morning, Evelyn followed Andrew and Zach to the selection ground of the noble girl camp. There was a black crowd of people. Besides the nobles and commoners, the students of the military academy were the ones who came the most. Among them, there were many familiar faces that she had met in the military school. Perhaps they all felt that they had met her and had the friendship of fellow students, so they all came. Those in the same dormitory also came. Daniel, William, Robert, Richard, Samuel, Kevin. Everyone was fist-pumping and stretching on the training ground. Evelyn stared at them carefully for a long time. Among them Daniel, Richard and Robert's powers had already risen to the 5th level. Zach, who was beside her, had also risen up the day before yesterday. Everyone had been working hard for her in private. Seeing her personally come over to watch, everyone looked at her with fluttering eyes, very embarrassed. This time, there were also a lot of 6th and 7th ranked alien. These were the ones who had participated in the guard selection many times before and didn't get selected. Don't underestimate the fact that there are more men than women in the interstellar era. As long as there was a slight chance, everyone would not let go. Further up, the 8th and 9th ranked adepts were the best of the nobles, and they would directly participate in the selection of her husband in half a year's time, and would not come to participate in the selection of the guards. When the time came, President Chin's husband, Chu Zhu, was the one who was specifically in charge of the escort army selection matters. He held an instrument in his hand and first brushed down the 2nd and 3rd order ones. These were the ones who came to make up the numbers. It was fine to match a 1st or 2nd order noblewoman, but a 9th order noblewoman was a bit underqualified. Those who were brushed down reluctantly looked back at her, and eventually left with heavy feet. Immediately, half of the people were left on the field. Then came the first level, a combat skills competition. Weapons were placed all over in front of everyone, and they needed to skillfully assemble all the firearms, then hit the living targets in front of them, and advance if they completed all the tasks within the stipulated time. At Chi's command, everyone flew into action. Evelyn watched with interest the movements of their hands, assembling the firearms in a hurry, those high-tech guns she had never seen before. Soon the first person to complete the task appeared. It was a 7th-order psychic. I think his name was Yanni. Then came the second and the third. Daniel, Robert, and Richard were also in the top 10. Those who didn't finish within the stipulated time were all eliminated, which left another part of the population missing. The second level was motorized driving training, considering that the escort girls needed to frequently drive various means of transportation, so this skill selection was specially launched. The main thing was that the members of the escort army had to be skilled in driving hover cars and flying ships, and the weapons on top of the vehicles had to know how to do it as well. This one was simpler than the first, and everyone basically completed the task well. There were still about 200 to 300 people on the field. The last task was infiltration skill training. It was also the hardest of the 3 selections. Parachuting, climbing, traversing bombing zones, recognizing iconograms, and long-distance cross-country marching. The last program would be the key to being able to join the Evelyn Guard, and this time there would be no timing. The top 50 would advance. All could use their powers to interfere with their opponents. Evelyn sat high up on the viewing platform with an endless view below. Rumble, the flying ship stalled overhead, blowing a gale. Andrew draped a jacket over her. The doors of the ship opened, and like dumplings, one by one, they jumped down against the wind. Parachutes opened, and everyone landed. The first thing in front of them was a small mountain to climb up with their bare hands. At this moment, all sorts of different abilities came into play. Seeing her happy, Zach took out some snacks and drinks and handed them to her. Evelyn's eyes lit up. There were actually melon seeds. This was the perfect scene to get high on melon seeds. Zach saw her interest in the tiny melon seeds and took them and peeled them for her. Evelyn's features were all scrunched together. If she didn't peel it herself, did it have a soul? Zach explained in a low voice. This thing is too hard. Don't knock your teeth. Good boy. I will help you peel it. You are responsible for eating it. This person is treating himself as a national treasure. Knocking a melon can knock the teeth. Then this tooth is not much use. She waved her hand in a funereal manner. Forget it. Just eat it. The competition below continued. There were already 7 or 8 people who had passed the first level of unarmed rock climbing. Next, everyone needed to protect their bodies and cross the bombing zone. This level, there was some luck involved. The lucky ones might pass smoothly. The unlucky ones might be chased and bombed. The good thing is that they are all psychics with thick skin, so a few injuries and some blood is nothing. Evelyn looked carefully. Keenly saw Daniel. This kid is lucky, all the way as through no man's land. Originally ranked 10 outside. Hard to rely on good luck all the way to the top 3. Although he avoided being bombarded, but he ranked up, the others were not happy. All kinds of supernatural powers attacked towards him, all wanting to pull him down from the front. Daniel, of course, fought back, flames flaring indiscriminately at the others, the closer ones getting their hair and eyebrows blazed away, and he himself wasn't far behind, his body covered in wounds of all sizes. Evelyn frowned as she watched. She still liked Daniel. After all, he was the first person she had met when she came to this world. She had also thought about it for 3 days this time. Daniel had defended her when she hadn't revealed her identity in the beginning and was still weak. The guy had a somewhat childish temper, but he was also really handsome, and she had seen his body. It was kinda sexy. 2 piles of blush drifted to her cheeks at the thought, and she patted her head, throwing those yellow scraps out the window. It must have been a long time since she'd seen a man. That's why she was like this. Andrew beside her glanced at her, rushing to look at Daniel on the field. The heart soured. The bombing zone ended, and everyone picked up their gear on the ground and followed their destination according to the optical map in their gear as the final step. There will be all sorts of obstacles on the way, as well as harassment from others. It was also the most dangerous level. Evelyn was watching closely as the people underneath had begun their first round of sparring, and in each case, it was the one called Yanni who was way ahead, with everyone's firepower being directed at him first, creating a lot of trouble for him. But in the end, being a 7th-ranked psychic, he dodged the various attacks with ease. His ability was earth-based, and those who gave him trouble, the next second the road in front of them all dented in, and the whole person fell down into a big pit within the land. Yanni raised his mouth with a smile and left in style. In the final level, he lived up to his name and took first place as well. Evelyn's heart fluttered. Grass, that's cool. Following closely behind, the second and third all made it through. In the top 50, sadly, only Daniel and Richard passed out of her roommates. Robert was backstabbed by the others in the middle of the race, slowed down a step, and would fall in the 51st position. Come on, let's go to lunch first. Andrew cleared the table. Evelyn was still in a bit of a daze. Ah, it's over? Zach smiled and nodded. Yeah, they'll go back and clean themselves up, and you'll be the one to personally choose the 9 guard captains this afternoon. That being said, Evelyn could only get up and follow them out. It was just that she had just been eating, and she couldn't eat her lunch now. Why not just purify a few people during her lunch break? As soon as she thought of it, she told Zach to go eat with Andrew while she paced herself down to the office lobby and took on 3 more purification tasks. She stayed in her office and waited for the purifiers to arrive. The door was opened and a man in a suit paced in, snapping the lock. You're the purifier? No need to lock the door, come on over. The man lazily sat down across from her, teetering on his legs. Evelyn frowned, feeling strange about this man. Put your hands up. The man lazily sat down across from her. Aren't you forgetting something? Huh. Oyang Kayaketsu, remember? She shook her head. What did the Oyang family have to do with her? He abruptly moved closer, his eyes dangerously sizing her up for a long time. Looks like the news is right. You really have lost your memory, ah. Evelyn was on guard. Who the hell are you? What are you doing here? Her hand quietly covered the red alarm button under the table, to be pressed should this man do something detrimental to her. He stood up and paced over to her, looking down and unbuttoning his cuffs. I'm Brian, your husband. Evelyn was shocked. When did she have a husband? How had she not known that herself? She shot him a look. Could this man be the original owner's husband? Brian had a pair of long legs. The whole person was a 9-headed body proportion, and he was full of a reserved air. At first glance, he was not an ordinary person. So the reason why the original owner fled was to avoid him? She fled, and he chased her, and it was hard for her to fly. Footsteps came from outside the door. Evelyn's mind was in a trance, and her whole body was picked up by Brian and placed on the table. His knees rested against her legs slightly apart. His hands rubbed her waist, and his tongue licked his cheeks. Gee, how long has it been, and you've forgotten? How could she suddenly go into a trance when she was clearly just waiting to press the alarm at any moment? You're controlling me with psychic powers? Evelyn narrowed her eyes and gritted her teeth. Brian stroked her face. Don't be so nervous, baby. There was a knock at the door, and at the same time, his hot kiss fell. Evelyn closed her teeth as he reached up and curbed her jaw so hard she winced involuntarily at the pain. The move cheapened Brian, and the tip of his tongue swept roughly into her mouth, sucking her to the point of pain. Evelyn bit down hard on the tip of his tongue with all her strength. A rush of blood spread through her mouth, and Brian didn't stop at all. Is anyone there? A man outside inquired. Gagged, she had no way to call for help. Trying to break free from his shackles, Brian was strong. 2 long legs pressed tightly against hers, and one hand held the wrist joints of both her hands against her head. No one. Just now I did receive a message that Evelyn's noble daughter took my purification order, yeah. Evelyn is really angry. Who the hell is this person, rushing in and forcing a kiss? She hates this feeling of being controlled. How come the effect rebound didn't work until now? Is it because he didn't hurt her? So the effect rebound didn't work? She didn't have long to think about it, attaching her inner strength to her hands and breaking free with a flourish, the man's shirt being rolled open by her inner strength, revealing the scarred chest inside. Zach's voice came from the door. Why don't you come in? No response to the knock. Zach directly blasted the lock of the door with his thunderbolt, and all he saw was Evelyn with red swollen lips and a reserved man. Brian let out an evil laugh. We'll meet again. He fell straight through the window, a large piece of glass shattered by the weight of his body. Some of it lodged into Brian's back, and he was oblivious, disappearing from sight the next second. Zach padded over to the window and looked down. There was no sign of Brian anywhere. Even the broken glass had disappeared. He's supposed to have spatial powers. Evelyn wiped her mouth in disgust. Whatever it is about psychic powers, using psychic powers to control her and forcing a kiss, rude man. Zach stared at her red and swollen lips. He went to the bathroom and washed a towel, helped her wipe her mouth carefully, and kissed her gently. Go back first. Evelyn waved her hand. No, let the people waiting to be purified come in. Andrew didn't arrive until she finished purifying the first person. He was worried that Evelyn would be hungry, so he went home and specially made some of her favorite food and brought it over. Seeing her tiger face and not in a good mood, he looked at Zach suspiciously. What's wrong? Zach shook his head and didn't answer. Evelyn was in a bad mood, finishing purifying for the remaining 2. She hadn't forgotten what Brian had just said. And who was Oyang Kyoyu? Coming into the Star Age, the only person she knew with the last name Oyang was that one instructor, Manuel. Andrew, do you know Brian and Oyang Kyoki? Andrew was stunned for a moment. No, I'll ask Manuel. Zach reassured her. Don't worry, there's only one noble in the stars with the last name Oyang. Evelyn let her heart drop a little After eating the loving lunch Andrew made, the three of them walked together towards the auditorium. 50 people had already packed up and changed their clothes and sat neatly on the stage waiting. President Chun was also there this time. She handed over the information in her hand. Take a look, these 50 people's resumes. Evelyn took it and carefully turned it up. The information was also sorted by ranking. This meant that Yanni was first in line, and some of the less patient noble women didn't even bother flipping through the later ones, making their choices after only looking at the resumes of the first few people. So that's why people try to rank as high as possible. Evelyn didn't get tired of it, scanning through them one by one. After consulting with Zach and Andrew for a while longer, 9 candidates were chosen. The men at the bottom were a little nervous at the moment, especially Yanni. He was a side branch of the Jiang family and was considered a relative of Samuel, who was the main branch. His age is already 27 years old, and if he doesn't get selected this year, he won't be able to get married and have a family in his life. His feelings towards each noblewoman are similar. There is no special favorite, and what he carries on his shoulders is just reproduction. It wasn't that he hadn't won first place before, and he wasn't bad looking, but the ferocious aura all over his body led to no noblewoman being willing to choose him. He had been hunting mutant species in the army for many years, and had unknowingly taken on a vicious aura. That aura was tempered from blood and flesh killings, and it was simply not something he could control himself. President Chun, I've chosen. Evelyn handed her the information. The chosen ones she had circled in the upper left corner. President Chun looked it over and was a bit surprised. Have you thought about it? Not all of the people she selected were ranked high. There were also those ranked lower. Regardless of what others did, Evelyn was a face controller anyway, and these escorts were said to be dedicated to protecting her, but in fact they were all reserves for her future husband. So in her case, looks come first, strength comes second. She has effect rebound. Even if someone wants to hurt her, it's not that easy. The person who would have to pull the lamp to sleep in the future would look ugly, and she wouldn't be able to get down. Seeing that she was sure, President Chen didn't persuade anymore. All right, then you can read it yourself. Evelyn took the information and scanned a circle of the men underneath. Daniel looked at him blearily, that look of resignation and pity. She hid a smile from the corners of her lips and got up the idea of teasing him. Yanni, Richard. 8 names were read in a row, none of them Daniel. The names that were read in turn walked up to the stage and stood facing her, Daniel's heart dropping further and further down, his eyes reddening a little again. He choked a little, restraining his sore eyes. Daniel. He was a little overwhelmed to hear his name so abruptly, and the men beside him could afford to lose, smiling and congratulating him even if they hadn't been chosen themselves. What are you waiting for? Go up. Amidst the congratulations of the others, Daniel made his way up to the stage with heavy feet and stood in front of her. A group of people yelled the oath. I, XXX, will always be loyal to your daughter, bravely face all difficulties and challenges, not fearing sacrifice or hardship. Will defend Evelyn to the death with my life and blood. Daniel read along, his mind still a little foggy, and after catching a glimpse of Evelyn's mischievous smile, what could he not understand? She was doing it on purpose, deliberately, making his mood go up and down like a roller coaster. The ceremony was also over at this moment, so he took a big step over and directly picked Evelyn up in a hug. Evelyn let out a cry of surprise, and with both legs firmly coiled around his waist, she pounded his chest with her small fists. What are you doing? Daniel couldn't restrain himself from being filled with love, hugging her tightly, itching to rub her into his flesh and blood, never to separate again. President Chin's eyebrows knitted lightly. This escort was a bit too unstable. Seeing that his wife was unhappy, Chu Zhu was busy stepping forward. Daniel, who allowed you to make a move on your daughter in public? Your duty is to protect your daughter, not to rely on your status. Evelyn nudged Daniel, and he let go. She stood back up and explained with a smile. It's fine. It's just that we haven't seen each other for a long time. President Chen, I hope you don't take offense. She also knew that Chu Yu standing out must be President Chen showing his dissatisfaction. As expected after hearing her explanation, President Chen waved his hand and took Chu Ru away. Yanni on the side implicitly looked at Evelyn and Daniel. This noblewoman is really different. In the past, which of those noble women didn't treat the guards around them as people by virtue of their status? Never heard of anyone standing up and speaking up for the men. He was in quite a good mood and quietly looked at Evelyn's face again. How did she look so white? Doesn't she even get a tan? The selection of the escorts was over, and Andrew arranged for everyone to stay in the villa. The reason why he assigned her such a big house, besides her own value, was that the guards beside her had to follow her around. If you don't stay close to her, is that called protection? So at the beginning, there were many empty rooms within the villa, and the 9 captains of the escort army that were elected each chose their own room. Next they had to go and personally screen the people under their hands. Each of them would be in charge of a squad of 10 people. Generally speaking, most of the captains would choose some friends who were close to them as well as relatives in the family. When the time came for the noblewomen to choose their husbands, whoever they chose would be beneficial to their family. There was also nothing in the Star Era that said that brothers couldn't share a daughter. Just kidding, it's so hard to get a wife. It's good to have one. What do you dislike? Although the escort army is a reserve for your daughter's husband, there are advantages and disadvantages. The good thing is to protect the noblewoman, and it's normal to fall in love with her over time. The disadvantage is that if you choose one of the noblewomen, you can't run for the other noblewomen's husband selection ceremony. In other words, you are bound to this noblewoman for the rest of your life. If she doesn't want you, you can't find someone else. This is so unreasonable. Who called the interstellar era? There are many men and few women. If you were to a world where there are more women than men, you have to compete with so many people for a man. Just thinking about it gave Evelyn goosebumps. She couldn't stand it. The next day, Zach had to go back to school, and Andrew had to go to the army to take care of some work. Daniel and Richard couldn't go back to school now that they had joined Evelyn's guards. The three of them talk about getting ready to go back to school together. Evelyn still continued to go to the office hall to do purification tasks, for the first time with a few more familiar people to separate. She is still a little reluctant. After dinner in the morning, she wrapped her arms around Zach's waist and pouted. So you're coming back to stay the night, right? Zach dotingly rubbed her head. Of course, I'm just going back to class, and I'll be back with you every night from now on. Pouting, Evelyn let go. Okay then, you guys make sure you come back early. Zach took her shoulder and gave her a kiss. Andrew looked uncertain, his clenched fists bursting with veins. It was only then that he let it be known that he was far from as calm as he seemed to be in his heart. He'd been confirming his identity with Evelyn for some time now, but it had never been as subdued as Zach's, so he'd never dared to kiss and hug her openly. His eyes were so hot that Evelyn looked down in embarrassment, then gave Andrew a kiss on the cheek as well. You too, come back early. At that, the little bit of discomfort in his heart dissipated cleanly. The other 9 escorts were all outside with their eyes and noses, envious and jealous. There was no telling when the noblewoman would be able to take a look at them. Daniel was the one who didn't know how to die. Seeing that those 2 men had kisses, he also clamored for them. In his mind, the fact that he was chosen as an escort meant that Evelyn accepted him. Evelyn looked at Zach and then at Andrew in bewilderment. Both of those men smiled at her and gave her a great deal of autonomy. Evelyn just gritted her teeth and went up and kissed Daniel, who unlike Andrew and Zach knew how to take what he wanted. Unlike Andrew and Zach, who knew how to take a good thing and leave it at that. He took Evelyn in his arms and gave her a French kiss on the mouth. Evelyn was kissed by him and her legs went weak. There are still so many people here. Can't you restrain yourself? Daniel barfed his mouth, still somewhat savoring the sweetness of what he had just experienced. He heatedly smiled. Baby, wait for me to come back. After saying that, he took a big step and invited Zach and Richard to go. Everyone got a kiss, but Richard, who impatiently shook off Daniel's hand on his shoulder. The acquaintances were gone, and although there were other escorts present, none of them were familiar with her, and no one was talking for a while. The entire parlor was empty. Evelyn gathered her clothes together uncomfortably. Cold, Yanni knelt down and touched her feet. Then he picked her up across the couch and cupped her feet under his stomach with both hands. The flesh of a man who worked out all year was hard. Evelyn unconsciously stomped on it with her foot as if it were his abs. Following her gaze, she only saw Yanni's military pants bulging a big bag all of a sudden. Embarrassed, she blushed and spoke as if she were running away. I'm going to go change. I have to go out. Yanni nodded and watched her go back to her room. The other escort's jaws dropped. Is this the first place? It's possible to steal the lead on something like this. Just now the noblewoman's face was red. Daniel and Richard, not to mention them, knew Evelyn before she was chosen as an escort. But Yanni was as new to the noblewoman as they were. Where did this kid learn these routines? Inside the military school. A few people had just walked into the school when a number of classmates were ushered in next to them. Everyone was counting on their classmates' connections to see if they could go through a back door and join Evelyn's escort army as well. Although they couldn't be the captain, being an ordinary member of the team wasn't bad either. Daniel, it's been a long time. You were so top yesterday, you actually managed to make it into the top 50. Have you chosen your men yet? Do you think you should consider me? I'm from the single soldier department. Speaking of which, I'm a brother to all of you in the combat department. I'm already at the 4th rank. Take a look at me. There's also me. Running errands and doing odd jobs for you guys is still no problem. A large group of people were talking around a few people. This was the first time the trio had enjoyed this treatment since joining the school. Daniel's mouth grinned widely. What? How do you guys know that your daughter has accepted me as her boyfriend? Crowd. This bull-headed reply left the crowd speechless for a while. Who needed to know that? They just wanted to join the escort. As the group walked and talked, Daniel and Richard just didn't let up on accepting everyone's request. An escort is not like a boyfriend. Boyfriends are allowed to have their own careers as a reserve for their future husbands. So Zach went straight back to school, canceled his vacation, and went back to class.